Boyfriend won't have sex with me unless I wear a corset. I'm suffocating and he refuses to acknowledge the problem. So, I'm an 18-year-old woman, and for the past 9 months I've been dating this guy who's 25. We met through mutual friends and instantly clicked, he was everything I wanted. He's chivalrous, caring, honest, and so attentive. With him, I felt truly seen for the first time in what felt like forever. But before I met him, I struggled so much with my weight. I have PCOS, which means my body holds onto weight like it's a full-time job. I'm 5 feet 3 inches, and at one point, I was 154 pounds. Now I'm up to 176, and honestly, the insecurity eats at me constantly. Early on, I was upfront with him about how I'm basically infertile because of the PCOS thing, just in case it mattered to him. He took it in stride, seemed totally fine with it. I needed something to make me feel better, so I started wearing a corset. Over my clothes, under my clothes, it didn't matter. If it hid my shape, that was enough. At first the thing was torture. Breathing hurt, my ribs felt like they were being crushed, but eventually my body adjusted. Still, wearing it while doing anything strenuous, exercise, even brisk walking, would just bring the pain and breathlessness right back. But when the corset was on, I actually liked how I looked. I felt good, maybe for the first time in ages. On every date, I wore it. Every single one. He never seemed to notice or care, so I figured, why mention it? It was my secret, just part of my arsenal to feel okay about myself. But about 3 months ago, we got intimate for the first time. We had gone all the way to that point, but when the time came and he took off my corset, I'll never forget his face. He just froze, staring at me like I'd grown a second head. I tried to keep things moving, to just move past the awkwardness, but he gently pushed me away and said he wasn't in the mood. That killed me. I left soon after, and we didn't really talk for a few days. Eventually, he texted and wanted to meet. When we talked, he told me point blank, he wasn't used to seeing me like that. I pressed him, asking what he meant, and he said, I thought you were a little skinnier. Honestly, at that moment, my heart plummeted. I thought it was over between us, so I blurted out that I'd do whatever it took to lose the weight. That's when he said, it's not really possible, and told me to just keep the corset on if we were ever intimate again. I agreed, desperately not wanting to lose him. But that's where things started to spiral. About 2 weeks ago, we were in bed together, and I started having real trouble catching my breath. He asked what was wrong, why I couldn't keep up, and I told him the truth, it was because of the corset. I said I'd take it off, and he just said, don't, or we won't keep going. So I kept it on, but under those conditions, I get absurdly sweaty, I swear I smell, and my body aches for days afterward. Every time we're together, I try dropping hints, I try gently bringing it up, but he's just clueless. If I ever say I'm not in the mood, he complains that I'm never in the mood. If I don't moan enough, whatever that's supposed to mean, he says I'm not enjoying it, even though I honestly get more pleasure by myself than I do with him lately. I don't want to break up over this. I truly love him, I believe he could be the one. Outside of all of this, he's incredible, and I don't want to lose something so special over, just sex. But I'm stuck, I don't know what else to do. What can I do to fix this? Update 1. So, I met him during Freshers Week before university actually began. At the time, I was still 18, admittedly, just barely, but I was fresh out of school and nervous about everything. We didn't actually start talking until 2 weeks after that event. Now, looking back, I realize that the age gap between us is definitely questionable, but I'm curious to see how my parents will react before I make any decisions. I want to clarify something else, I never lied to him about not wearing a corset. By the time we first slept together, we'd already been dating for 6 months. Not once had I gone out with him without my corset. In fact, sometimes I even wore them over my clothes. He never said anything about it, he never even acknowledged it, so I felt no need to explain. Why would I when it was always right in front of him? Also, I have to thank everyone who shared information about PCOS with me. Reading about others' experiences has given me hope that I can still become a mom someday, when the time is right. My boyfriend, though, doesn't want kids, at least for now, so I suppose time will tell what happens between us when that conversation comes up. To those who suggested therapy, I want you to know I've been really thinking about it. Right now, I'm not in a financial position that would allow me to afford any kind of therapy, not on what I make. And my boyfriend has been clear, he won't be paying for anything like that for me, so I had kind of given up on the possibility. Still, I'm considering my options. And for everyone telling me to try losing weight again, I actually have. It's not a huge step, but I've applied for a membership at my local gym. I haven't told my boyfriend yet, I think he might actually be happy if he hears it, and maybe it'll make any future difficult conversations a little less harsh for both of us. Seriously, thank you all so much for your kindness and support. It means the world to me, and I've never received so much encouragement from so many people before in my life. Lastly, since it's come up, no, we don't use any protection or plan Bs. He's pretty spontaneous about these things, and since we're almost always at his place, he never wants to use anything. He says nothing will happen, probably because of my PCOS, though that's just my guess. I am planning to talk to him about me getting on birth control, because it feels like it's time for that conversation. Update 2. We went out for dinner today at 6, and for the first time in a while, I decided not to wear a corset. Of course, he noticed almost immediately, he always does. Casually, he asked why, and I told him I just didn't feel like it tonight. He just replied, "Well, that's a shame," and after that, the conversation between us dragged slowly, heavy and awkward, never really finding its spark. Dinner ended sooner than usual, maybe just 2 hours after we sat down. As we left, I asked if he could drive me home. Halfway through the drive, I wondered if maybe we could take a little detour, spend a little more time together, but he said he had things to do. That's when I decided to just confront the unspoken tension head on. I asked him, point blank, if he would break up with me just because I refused to wear a corset. I tried to sound confident, though inside I could feel the nerves trembling in my voice, and I'm sure he could hear it, too. He insisted it wasn't like that, but I knew what he'd said before, he wouldn't have sex with me unless I was wearing that corset. So I told him flatly that we're never having sex again. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I repeated myself, explained that I was done with corsets for good, and that's when he really got upset. He called me immature, said that we'd already talked about this. But I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told him I was tired of him never caring about what I wanted. I said I didn't want to wear a corset anymore, that I was tired of the way he got when I didn't listen to him, that I wanted to go on birth control, and that someday, yes, I actually wanted to have kids. We drove the rest of the way in silence, a thick, heavy quiet hovering between us. At my place, he stopped the car and told me maybe we should take a break. Fine by me, I shrugged, doing my best to act like it didn't bother me at all. That's when he started in, accusing me of cheating just because I seemed so indifferent. I looked him straight in the eye and told him that if he couldn't love me the way I truly am, maybe we needed more than just a break. He didn't reply, just got in his car and drove away, leaving me standing there. He hasn't texted me since. It's been almost 2 hours, and all I've done is sit here and cry. I keep thinking about messaging him first, but I'm terrified. I've never stood up to him before, never really argued. The silence is crushing, and every second I wonder if he'll finally say it's over. I never expected to feel so raw, but after everything, I just wanted to finally be honest. Update 3. Yesterday, I ended up falling asleep while sitting around, anxiously waiting and thinking about everything that had happened. Then, in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., he finally texted me, saying he was going to come over later today. I haven't responded yet, but I'm assuming he'll show up around 2 or 3, which is when I get back from volunteering, so I know we'll end up talking today. He said he discovered something, which has my nerves on edge. The thought of what that could mean is eating at me. The scary thing is, I know exactly how furious he'd be if he ever found out I'm sharing any of this. He was livid the last time he found out I'd confided in my friends about our relationship struggles. He didn't speak to me for almost a week, he was so angry. He said I was airing out our dirty laundry, and I do understand that, but all I had told my friends was that he never listens to a word I say. Now I can't help but dread what's coming. What if what he's discovered is something big? What if it's nothing? I keep hoping it turns out to be nothing important, but the anxiety is gnawing at me while I wait for him to show up. Update 4. He showed up at my place around 4 or 5, later than I expected. After volunteering, I wasn't even wearing my corset, but when he walked in, he told me I looked nice, that he was sorry, and that he was ready to listen. So I sat him down, trying to gather all the things I needed to say. Everything that had been bottled up inside me before, I managed to finally lay out before him, clearer now, more collected, with explanations I hadn't even realized I needed to express until that moment. Once I finished, he asked why I was telling him all of this now, why I hadn't said these things originally. I told him it was because friends had given me advice, given me the strength to get my thoughts together. That's when he reached into his pocket, pulled out my Reddit post, and asked if that was the advice I was talking about. I looked him straight in the eyes and told him those people had been better friends to me than he'd ever managed to be. Suddenly, he raised his hand at me. He didn't hit me, didn't even touch me, but I flinched. In that split second, fear knotted itself in my stomach. My roommate was out, and I didn't have a single thing to defend myself if he really tried something. He went quiet, a heavy, suffocating silence, before he just exploded. Shouting, full-on screaming, getting right up in my face. I was paralyzed for a moment until I pushed him back, telling him to grow up. He started ranting about me airing our dirty laundry on Reddit, how his friends had seen it, how I was being gaslit by strangers online. He demanded if I'd made that attention-seeking post just to be complimented by others, for people to tell me how good I look with or without a corset. At that point, the tears had already started. I told him to get out, just leave, because he'd started calling me fat, ugly, and insisted nobody would ever love me the way he did. And I'm embarrassed to say it, but I almost believed him, because he just looked so pitiful and desperate. But then, out of nowhere, he tried to come on to me. He started going on about how beautiful I looked, how he needed me to survive, and suddenly he wouldn't get off me. Something inside me just snapped, and I punched him. He let go, stunned, and that was all I needed. I broke up with him right then and there. I didn't bother to explain, there was nothing left to say, and he wouldn't have listened anyway. I threatened to call the authorities if he didn't leave, and finally, he stormed out. I blocked him everywhere. After he left, I haven't told a soul in my real life about what happened. I couldn't even bring myself to leave my room, much less face class. I feel like something inside me is missing, because I truly did love him once. But I refuse to let him have the satisfaction of knowing how much this still hurts, or drag myself through the mud by dwelling on it. He isn't the man I fell for, that man doesn't exist anymore, and it's taken me this long and a mountain of support from others to fully accept that. I'm grateful I finally have. Update 5. Yesterday morning I was halfway down the stairs to head to class when our building receptionist called my name. There was a box on the counter, white, neat little black ribbon, my first and last name written on the top in his handwriting. I didn't even have to open it to know. Still, I took it to the lobby chair, hands shaking, and lifted the lid. A brand new corset, smaller than any I've ever worn, with a receipt tucked under the tissue and a note that said, "For when you come to your senses." I couldn't get a full breath, I felt that old tightness even without the laces. I closed the box, turned around, and walked straight to campus security. They pulled up camera footage and there he was, 20 minutes earlier, hood up, buzzing the door and sweet-talking a first year into letting him in. The officer offered to call the police and suggested a no trespass order for campus grounds. I sat there and gave a statement with my palms pressed flat to the desk to stop them from trembling. I left with a printout of the incident number folded in my pocket and a safety escort to my class. I didn't realize how much my shoulders had been living up by my ears until that walk felt quiet and flat and safe. That afternoon, I dragged the suitcase from under my bed and took out every corset I owned. I thought I'd feel rage, but it was more like taking a cast off a limb and seeing your skin again. I brought them to the theater department's costume shop. The woman at the counter didn't even blink, just wrote my name down like I was donating a bag of buttons. I walked home in my lightest sweatshirt and actually felt the air moving around me. I also finally went to the clinic. I told the nurse I wanted birth control and that my cycles are chaotic because of PCOS. They had me do a urine test before they'd write anything. I sat on the crinkly paper in that cold room, staring at the poster that explains ovulation like it's a math problem, and waited for the knock. The nurse came back with that careful face that makes your ears ring. The test was faintly positive. She said it could be a chemical, could be early. They drew blood to be sure and booked me for a repeat in 48 hours. I walked out into daylight that felt too bright and called my mom. When she picked up, I didn't even try to be brave. I told her everything like ripping a bandage off, how old he is, the corsets, the breakup, the box, the test. There was a pause so long I thought the line had dropped, and then she said, "I'm coming." My parents were here by evening. My dad didn't stride around or shout, he just sat at our kitchen table with his hands around a mug like he was warming them over a small fire and said, "We're going to keep you safe." They helped me file a police report for harassment. No drama, just facts, the corset and their footage and the messages he'd sent before I blocked him. The officer explained how a non-contact order works and told me not to answer unknown numbers. We changed the code on the building door and my roommate texted our group chat that no one is to let anyone tailgate into our floor. Then, the strangest piece dropped into place. A girl I didn't know DM'd me on Instagram. She had seen him in one of my older photos and asked, quietly, if he'd ever made me wear a corset. She's 20 now. They dated when she was 19. It was like reading my own messages, just with different hair and a different flat. She sent screenshots from a forum I wish I could unsee, threads about training your partner, pictures taken from behind and cropped to the shoulder blades, one in my living room with my favorite plant in the corner like a witness. Not explicit, not illegal, but mine. My skin. I forwarded the images to the officer and added them to the report. It felt like watching puzzle pieces snap together around a picture I didn't want to recognize. He tried to call from a blocked number twice that night. My phone buzzed on the table, faceless and insistent, but I let it go to voicemail and forwarded those, too. No more talking. No more explanations. I slept with the lamp on and the window cracked for the cold, and for the first time in a while my breath didn't catch on anything. Today I went back to the clinic for the blood draw results. They're still waiting on the labs. I have to go back again in 2 days to see if the numbers rise or fall. The nurse looked at me like a lighthouse, steady, not pitying, and went through options I didn't even know existed. It's strange, sitting in a quiet room where everything is gentle and measured, after months of being asked to be smaller, small enough to disappear. I'm not disappearing. I don't know which way the test will go. I do know I'm not putting that ribbon box back under any bed. It's evidence now. It's also a symbol, and I'm done wearing symbols. I'm walking to class without my hands covering my stomach. I'm answering the door only when someone I love is on the other side. And tonight, when my mom suggested we bake something, I said yes. We made a mess, flour on our sleeves, sugar on the counter, my dad pretending to read the instructions like he was narrating a documentary. I ate a warm cookie and it tasted like relief. Update 6. The lab called right after breakfast, while my mom was rinsing out the teapot and my dad was trying to find the news on a TV that only ever wants to show music videos. The numbers rose. It's early, but it's a viable rise, the nurse said, and my hand suddenly weighed 5 pounds with the phone in it. She talked me through timelines and options in a voice that didn't waver. I sat down on the cool tile because my legs had forgotten what to do. When I hung up, my mom slid a mug toward me and didn't push me either way. I didn't have a long speech in me. I just said I didn't want my body tied to him. I didn't want any more parts of my life handed to his shadow. She nodded. We booked the next appointment. They were running behind at the clinic, so we waited in a room painted a color that pretends to be calming. The nurse had a soft scarf looped around her neck like a cloud. She asked me more times than felt possible if I was sure, then handed me a glass of water and a pill. I swallowed. She told me exactly what would happen next, like she was laying out a map on the table. At home, I curled into my mom's sweater and pressed a heating pad to my stomach. It hurt and then it hurt less, and I cried through both parts without needing to explain why. My dad pretended he had to go downstairs to fix something, came back up with a bag of frozen peas and a story about how the thermostat fought him and lost, and left them on the coffee table like a peace offering to my abdomen. The cramps came like waves and then receded. I dozed and woke up and everything was very ordinary and very not. I slept with the window cracked again. The air felt colder and cleaner somehow. In the middle of all that, campus security called. They'd served him with a no trespass order for university property and logged my report with the new evidence. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with no caller ID and then another, like a broken metronome. I forwarded voicemail transcripts to the officer and then powered the phone down. I don't know, silence my attention. 2 days later, I bled the way they said I would and then it slowed, exactly like a guidebook promised. It was strange how obedience felt like mercy. I walked to the pharmacy by myself and picked up the birth control the nurse had sent to the counter. I paid, and the woman behind the till looked directly at my face and not at the items, and I loved her a little for that. The restraining order hearing was this morning. It wasn't like TV, the courtroom was smaller, and the benches creaked every time someone breathed. A woman with a bun so tight it felt like an opinion called cases one by one. He was already there when we walked in, at the far end with a man in a shiny suit. He looked different in overhead lighting, washed out, softer around the edges, like a photocopy of himself. The girl who messaged me on Instagram was there too. We didn't say a word to each other. We didn't need to. We sat like bookends. When it was my turn, my hands found the wood of the witness stand and wouldn't let go. I was sure my voice was going to crack, but it didn't. I told the judge about the box and the ribbon and the forum and the way my chest had been learning to be small for months. I told her about the break-in that was a smile and a buzz. I kept to dates and details, and somewhere between tissue paper and incident number the back of my neck stopped prickling. He tried to talk over me once and the judge didn't lift her head when she told him to wait. When his lawyer asked if I had encouraged anything by wearing the corset in the first place, the judge looked up fast and her glasses slid down her nose and she said, very clearly, "That's not how consent works in my courtroom." I almost laughed, except I didn't want to cry right after. The order was granted for a year with an option to extend. He can't come near my building, my classes, my volunteer site, or my home. He can't contact me directly or through anyone else, and if he posts or shares any images of me, the officer said we could add that and the platform would have to comply. When the judge read it out, he didn't look at me. He stared at the table like he could glare a hole through laminate. As we were leaving, the other girl touched my sleeve. She had a faint scar on her knuckle and nail polish that had been picked off in little windows. "I'm sorry," she said, and I said, "Me too," and that was all there was to it. After, my dad took us to a diner that has never once played the appropriate music for the hour. At 11 in the morning they were blasting something you'd normally hear in a club, and my mom asked for extra napkins like we were about to stage a picnic. My phone buzzed with an email from a service I didn't recognize. It was a notice that certain URLs had been removed after a legal request. I forwarded it to the officer and then to myself again for good measure. I think I've never loved the word removed before today. When we got back to the flat, there was chalk dust on the stairwell rail from someone's exam hack to keep their hands clean. I rubbed it off on my jeans and it left a ghost handprint on my thigh. My roommate was in the kitchen making ramen the complicated way, with the egg swirled in like silk. She looked at my mom and my dad, at me, at the heating pad plugged back in where my laptop usually lives, and said, "Want some?" It tasted important and salty and alive. This afternoon, I walked to the campus pool and sat on the bleachers with my feet on the tiles for a full 10 minutes before I got in. When I did, the water slid around me everywhere I exist. No laces biting, nothing telling my ribs to make room for nothing. I swam badly, like a kid splashing, and got out breathless and red-cheeked and grinning anyway. On the way home, I caught my reflection in a window, just a girl in a too big hoodie and damp hair. I didn't look smaller or bigger. I looked like someone who'd just been in the water. I booked counseling through the university. It turns out it's part of my fees, and the woman on the phone asked what name I wanted to use and whether I preferred morning or afternoon and if I needed a ground floor office. When she said, "We'll meet you where you are," I had to sit down on the curb because it landed a little too perfectly. My first appointment is next week. He hasn't tried to come by again. Maybe the paper scared him. Maybe it didn't, and the cameras did. Maybe it's none of my business why. My mom left her scarf on the back of my chair deliberately and my dad rigged my door so it makes an extra click when it shuts that I didn't know I was missing until now. Tonight we ate leftovers and watched something so dull it might have been a test pattern. I lay on the carpet and felt my heartbeat in my back, steady and boring. Update 7. I had my first counseling session yesterday in a room that smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and dust on hot radiators. The counselor had a trailing pothos that had decided one curtain rod was a tree and another was a friend. She spoke like a metronome that had been set to human, slow and even, and asked me to tell the story out loud, and I did without having to perform it. She taught me a trick for when my chest goes tight: find 5 things that are the color white and name them. Ceiling tile. Mug. Sneaker toe. Outlet cover. A paper tissue crumpled perfectly like a small cloud. My shoulders climbed down a step I didn't know they were on. When I came out, rain had started, the kind that seems to rise up from the pavement as much as fall from above. I cut across to the theater building on purpose. The costume shop was still open. The same woman from before was at the counter with a pincushion like a ladybug on her wrist. She thanked me again for the donation and asked if I wanted to see what they'd done. There they were, laced onto dress forms for a period drama, the laces hanging slack like commas. She showed me how they were building boning into the bodices instead, how you can create shape without strangling it. I thought about the word support and how everyone always means different things when they say it. I put my palm on one of the corsets, cool fabric, stiff seams, and felt nothing except that it now belonged to a story that wasn't mine. In the afternoon, my phone lit up with a number marked unknown but local. I let it go to voicemail and then listened to it with my mum's scarf wrapped around my wrist like a tether. It was a detective from the cyber unit. His voice had that careful cadence people practice when speaking next to a sleeping person. He said he had some questions about images that had been reported and removed, that my name had come up on multiple complaints, that there was no need to panic, and also could I please call back. I took the long way back along the pool windows so I could watch people cut through blue water like punctuation marks. When I finally called, he asked if I could come in. The station looked exactly the way it does on TV except flatter, under lights that made everyone look a little tired. He slid a printed list across to me like a menu. File names, dates, locations. Some were only place names: kitchen_lamp_11 p.m. blue sofa_13. Some had titles that made my teeth ache. He didn't make me look at the images. He let me describe my living room. I said, "There's a fiddle leaf fig that should have died last winter and refuses to." He said, "There's a reflection in the glass of a frame that matches your plant." He told me that based on multiple reports and the restraining order violation from the package, they'd obtained a warrant to seize his devices. He didn't use the word victim. He didn't use any word that made me a category. He said I could add an impact statement if I wanted. I said I'd like to write it on lined paper with a pen because my hands needed something to push against. When I got home, it was already dark in that late afternoon way that feels like a surprise betrayal every winter. My dad had fixed the lamp in the hallway so it comes on a beat before you think to be afraid. There was an envelope under our door that looked like any other bit of post until I saw the handwriting. No stamp, no return address, just my first name, swollen and slanted. I didn't touch it. I called campus security, and when they came up the stairs, one of them held a little evidence bag open and I nudged the corner of the envelope with a butter knife into it like it was a live insect. It was empty inside except for a strip of satin ribbon and a printout of a screenshot I recognized from the forum, my own shoulder blades of geometry I didn't consent to. The officer stepped back and said the word violation like an anchor dropping. It turns out he was still on campus. Cameras caught him ducking into the parking structure. I watched the feed in the security office, grainy bird's eye angles of gray concrete and students moving like commas. He walked through 3 levels, hood up, head down, not running but with purpose, a blur you could identify by the way he used his hands when he spoke and when he thought nobody was looking. 2 officers met him at the exit. It didn't turn into a scene. They didn't raise their voices. He did that thing where a person tries to become a rumor, slippery and deniable, and then he was just a person getting calmly handcuffed under lights that made everyone's skin look honest. A tow truck took his car because he'd wedged it where it wasn't meant to be and it felt like a small satisfying rhyme. The detective called again this morning. They'd executed the warrant. They found external drives. He said words like possession and transmission and pattern, and then he said the phrase unlawful recording. I sat on our floor with my back against the fridge and breathed like the counselor told me. Outlet cover. White plate. Dusty orchid leaf. My trainers. A receipt from the pharmacy I hadn't thrown away yet. I asked if I had to come in again. He said yes, but that I could bring someone. My mum pretended not to be glad I asked her. The interview room had chairs like dentist chairs, wipeable, just more square. The detective read through a consent statement line by line. At any point, you can pause. I thought about the ways I had tried to hit pause before and how many times it hadn't taken. He asked me about the angles of things. He asked if I'd ever seen a small black dot in the corner of a frame, a phone set face down that wasn't mine, a lens peeking out from a stack of books. I remembered the plant again, and how the window sometimes reflected at night like a second room, and I felt my whole face flush with anger that was not delicate at all. He told me I wasn't the only one, and I believed him without needing the proof because of the girl from Instagram and the way her nail polish had peeled in the same places mine always does. When we left, it was bright enough outside that everything felt flat and crisp, like the city had been ironed. My dad had packed the car with the things parents think are armor: a blanket from home, a bag of Satsumas, one of those weird door wedges with an alarm that screams like a kettle. My roommate stuck her head out and told me the kettle had actually screamed earlier because she'd forgotten it and it was okay because she put a sticky note on the handle that said "scream later." We're all learning new languages for the same things. I went swimming again. This time, I timed my breaths with the white lane markers, counted tiles because it helps. I thought of the judge's glasses slipping and the sound of my own voice not cracking and the detective's careful metronome and the way the costume shop woman never once said the word flattering. When I got out, my legs felt like they'd been plugged back into something old and reliable. In the locker room, someone had left a paperback open spine up on a bench, its pages splayed like a bird. I closed it and tucked it into Lost and Found so it wouldn't forget how to be a book. Tonight, the email came through. We are writing to inform you that your report resulted in the removal of additional content. It included a list of URLs like a row of fences. I forwarded it to the detective and then to my dad for no reason except that I wanted someone else to see the word removed. My mum brought me tea in the mug with the chip and asked if I wanted her scarf back. I said she should leave it a little longer. The apartment is the same shape it always was and somehow feels larger. The window is just a window and reflects only what's in front of it. When I lay down, I could feel my heart in my ribs and it didn't feel like knocking. It felt like living. Update 8. I got the AirTag notification in the changing room at the pool, hair wet, towel around my shoulders, my phone suddenly humming like a trapped insect. AirTag found moving with you. The words looked harmless and then my hands weren't. The app showed a pulsing circle that was basically the outline of my life: home, pool, lecture hall, the exact lazy triangle I've been walking. I hit play sound and every locker went quiet in my head. It chirped from my tote bag, that canvas one with ink stains and a rip I keep meaning to stitch. The noise came from the lining, not the pocket. I sat on the bench and unpicked the seam with my keys. It was the size of a coin and wider than anything deserves to be, taped in like a secret. I put it in a Tupperware for my lunch and snapped the lid because I needed something to press shut. Campus security scanned the serial with their phones like they were paying for a bus ticket. They didn't say his name out loud, but the look they gave the detective over the speaker said it for them. It counts as contact, the officer said, even if he never touched a thing. It counts as following, even if his feet weren't involved. By the time I got my trousers back on, there were 2 cruisers outside the parking structure again. It didn't turn into a scene this time either. It turned into paperwork and a lot of people's radios saying short, serious words. They took him in on the order violation and the stalking device and the thing where you think technology is a loophole but the law has better glasses than you do. I wrote my impact statement at the kitchen table on lined paper like a school assignment I was finally old enough to grade. I wrote that my breath is not a room you get to rent and my shoes are not tracking points and my body is not a map you can redraw. I wrote dates and places and the sound the AirTag made coming from my bag, how humiliating it is for fear to sound cheerful. My mum made me tea and didn't read over my shoulder and my dad sat across from me with a screwdriver because the bathroom door had decided to be dramatic and it was either fix it or listen to its feelings. The screwdriver slipped once and clinked off the tile and we all jumped and then laughed like it was allowed. The bail hearing was in a different room with a different judge and carpet that had lost an argument with 1,000 shoes. He wore a shirt that wasn't angry at the collar for once and the same expression he gives checkout clerks when he thinks being nice to them makes him better than he is. The prosecutor read out violation, monitoring device, no contact order. His solicitor tried to say misunderstanding and coincidence like they were spells. The judge had glasses too, and she pushed them up with one finger and said, very simply, that gadgets do not make ghosts of people. There were conditions added in a voice that made each one slot into place like a bolt: GPS tag, curfew, surrender of devices, a line around my life that is now not just an idea. He looked at the floor so hard I thought he might dig. He didn't look up at me. He didn't get to. The detective called later to say they'd pulled logs from the forum and from the cloud he thought was a treehouse. Words like metadata and linked account and pattern of behavior came through tinny on the line while I sat cross-legged on the carpet and followed the seam of the rug with my finger like a road. He said there would be charges from the Crown Prosecution Service soon, that my statement helped, that the other statements helped. He said plural without ceremony. I put the phone down and let myself feel ugly, cry angry for 5 minutes and then exactly 5 more because my counselor told me sometimes a timer makes it feel like the ocean might return the beach afterward. The theater woman asked if I wanted to help backstage for a dress rehearsal because they were short on hands and my name was still in her book from the donation. I stood in the wings in black clothes that smelled like dust and borrowed adrenaline and asked actors, may I touch you to adjust this? And tell me when to stop, and I stopped when they said stop. I laced one bodice for a girl who laughed and said, not too tight, my lungs still have plans, and we both breathed in sync without meaning to. When the lead exhaled after the final bow, I was the one who unhooked the hidden closures and told her, you're free, and she rolled her shoulders and said, God, that feels good, and I believed her in my bones. The girl from Instagram started a group chat with 3 more names. One was saved in her phone as Blue Sofa because that's how she found her, a lamp and a thread and a plant and a reflection. We called it Laces Untied and it's the only group chat I've ever been in where read receipts feel like hand squeezes. We're very bad at small talk and excellent at sending each other photos of mundane triumphs, a bowl of soup, a new keychain, a slam door that makes an extra click. One of them is going to the same counselor next week, different day, same pothos. Another wants to volunteer with the Women's Center on campus and asked if I would come sit at the table with her the first time so she doesn't have to be the only girl behind a bowl of pens. Yes. Yes, of course, I started taking the birth control in the morning with my vitamins and a glass of water so cold it feels freshly invented. The side effects are doing their polite dance. My skin's a bit moody, my appetite does a small shrug at odd hours. The nurse says we'll adjust. She says it like we're partners in a two-person rowing boat and that's all I've ever wanted from my body, company, not instruction. I booked a GP appointment about the PCOS, not to fix me like a broken thing, but to manage a body I live in like a flat I actually like and want to patch properly. 2 nights ago, someone knocked on our door at 11:30 and the wedge with the alarm sang like the kettle. It was the officer checking the GPS ping protocol, she said, and apologized for the scare. She stood in our hall and admired my dad's ridiculous door fix like it was a sculpture. The thing about fear now is it has uniforms and forms, and while I hate all of this with the part of me that loves my own quiet, I keep meeting people whose job is not to ask me to be smaller. It does something alchemical to your spine. I swam again today and counted the white things without needing to. Ceiling strip light. Tile squares. The froth that happens when you kick off the wall hard. A plaster on someone's ankle like a flag. The line painted down the middle of the lane that looks, from underneath, like a road to somewhere uncomplicated. I'm not graceful yet. That's not the point. I got out, and I didn't check my phone until I was dry and dressed and the sky was doing that late afternoon blue that forgives windows. There was an email from the detective, charge approval granted. There was one from the platform, content preserved for evidentiary purposes. There was one from the theater, can you call for cues tomorrow? Our stage manager's got the flu. I said yes to the one that asked me to speak quietly and with authority into a headset in the dark while other people step into light. I put my mum's scarf on and tucked one end into my jacket so it wouldn't flap, and on the way home I bought satsumas and a pack of needles to mend the rip in my tote. I sat at the table and stitched the seam with small, neat, ordinary stitches, and when I tied off the thread, I pressed the knot flat with my thumbnail until it learned.